What if you could do anything? What would you do? What would you do if you could do anything that you decided that you wanted to do? Um, uh, you name it. I don't know. Maybe you want to write a book or make a movie, or maybe you want to travel the world. Maybe you want to start a business, but you're afraid that it'll fail. What would you do if doubt and discouragement didn't get in there, right? Doubt, boy, it is powerful. Let me tell you a story. I have told this story so many times. It's a personal story. It's a story about me. It's about a time when I was just struggling with a whole lot of doubt. I was struggling with a whole lot of things in my personal, my professional career as an Air Force officer. I was a major in the United States Air Force, just moved to Hickam Air Force Base, Hawaii. I spent most of my career as an air crew member flying KC-135 aircraft all over the world. And now I have been thrust into Hickam, the Pacific Hickam Air Force Base over in Hawaii. I was now a war planner in a part of the world that I was unfamiliar with, the Pacific. And it basically I came from what we would call a heavy aircraft background, flying big airplanes, cargo airplanes, air refuelers, 707 type of airframes, to now working in an area for a command that was very fighter centric, very Navy centric. And boy, I got there and I really felt out of my element. And then shortly after me and my family arrived in Hawaii, about a month later, 9/11 happened, 9/11/2001, and we were thrust into, chaos, if you will. My schedule was crazy. I was having to do things that I was completely unprepared for. I had not been trained yet. I had nothing, but we didn't have time for that because everything had just gone crazy. I've shared this story so many times in teaching and different papers I've written, and I shared in my latest book called Forged. I shared in this Forged how pain brings great gain. I would encourage you to get this. Probably I'll say this is the best book on understanding and seeing how pain and suffering works in our lives for the positive, how it brings us to where God wants us to be. So Forged, how pain brings great gain into your life. So I've told this story. I tell the story in this book. I'll put it up there again, and you can get it on Amazon if you just look under Todd Robinson Forged, how pain brings great gain into your life. I think you'll enjoy the book and you'll see this story again. But I got there, and man, it was tough. And not only that, I worked for a boss who was very tough, very difficult, extremely difficult to work for. And I'll tell you, I was miserable for my first year over there, just miserable. I doubted myself so much. I had so much doubt. I was miserable in my work environment. I didn't know what I was doing. I struggled. I felt so inadequate in the environment that I was in, and I went home. I was working the late shift in the what we would call the Pacific Operations Support Center, the POSC. It's just a planning cell, and I was working there late nights as we were sending forces and airplanes and equipment out all over the world to support the effort right after 9/11. And there was a lot of unknowns, a lot of craziness. And anyway, it just, man, my whole demeanor, my whole psyche, everything about me was in the toilet. And I literally I went to work every day thinking how much I hated going to work I wasn't helping myself at all. Anything that I teach you on these videos is because I've been there. I've learned these things. It's not because I'm sitting here telling you these things because I've read them somewhere. Though much of it I have read, but I've learned it along the way. I've just learned through pain and heartache and trials, how to do things, how not to do things. And it's just my desire to share those things here with you, whether you take it or not, whether you like it or not, whether you can do anything with it, that's up to you. But that's my heart, that's my goal, and it's kind of my passion, if you will. And so, man, self-doubt, inadequacy all over me. I'm not enough. This new position was just tough on me all the way. It was tough on my family, even though we were in paradise. We were in Hawaii, right? And it just was so. To add to all the stress and the pressure, I just had a really, really difficult boss to work for. Um, and man, I just didn't know what to do. So I spent that whole first year. I literally spent that whole first year fighting the system, fighting the man, fighting everything, right? And what was I going to do? And after about a year of this, 365 days of this misery, right? Just this misery, being deeply discouraged. I hated my job. I hated being in Hawaii, even though it was beautiful there. Just the circumstances were terrible. We felt trapped there. And how was I going to overcome these feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt? And it was, let me tell you what happened. It was really nothing I did. It really wasn't. It was the Lord. I would get up every morning very early, and still do. But I would get up very early in the morning, and I would go downstairs in the house we were living at over there in Kaneohe, Hawaii, the windward side of the island. So beautiful. We lived at the base of the most beautiful mountains I've ever seen in my life. And you wake up in the morning to these exotic birds singing, and you just couldn't, anybody else would have said, Todd, why were you so miserable? Right? It was my mind. It was in my head. I was in my head. I was so in my head. It was terrible how much I was in my head. And I was reading my Bible one morning before leaving for work, and I was praying, and a lot of times my prayer was, Lord, get me out of this, right? And that's not what God wanted. That is just not what God wanted. He didn't want to get me out of anything. He had me there for a reason. He had me where I was to teach me a hard lesson. That pain and that doubt and that inadequacy and working for a boss who was impossible to please was exactly what I needed to get me to the next level in my Air Force career, in my life. It wasn't just about my career. It was about my life. It was about who God was making me to be. And I'll never forget that morning. It's like God hit me upside the head with a 2x4. He just went down to Lowe's, pulled the biggest one he could off the shelf there, brought it back to my house, and just popped me right upside the head. And he said, Todd, your circumstances and your boss are not your problem. Your problem is you. You are your biggest problem, Todd. You have a negative attitude. You don't trust me. You don't trust God. That's what God's just revealing. You don't trust me in this situation. You're looking at all your circumstances. None of that stuff matters. What I'm doing to you right now, what I'm putting you through, Todd, is what you need. It's for your good. I need you to go in there. I need you to have the best attitude you can have. I need you to start thinking like your boss. You might not like him, but you need to start anticipating what he wants. Think about what he wants and do the very best job you can do. Have the best attitude you can have, and don't worry about anything else. And you just trust me. That's what God said to me that morning about 5:30 in the morning on my couch. I can still see it like it was yesterday. I can see where I was on that couch downstairs in my living room, Kaneohe, Hawaii. Sun's not up yet. It's dark outside. And that's what God told me sitting there on that couch. I went into work that morning. I was a new person. I was a new man. Nothing had changed. Not one. My boss didn't change. The circumstances of work hadn't changed. Nothing had changed. I changed. I went in there, and it was like a light bulb, like a switch went on. And Todd Robinson changed that day. All of the significant changes in my life have occurred through tremendous pain. That's how God works sometimes. He will bring the heat. He will make you uncomfortable. Now, I like it when God comforts me. I do. But in order for me to be comforted, I've got to be uncomfortable. God is only the comforter to those who get uncomfortable. And God wants to make you uncomfortable. He wants to make you so stinking uncomfortable so you will look to Him for comfort and change. You're not going to change, and I'm not going to change without the pain and the heat of the fire. And that's what God was doing to me. It was the pain and the heat of that fire. And I went in there and so that was I was coming up into my first year, and I was going into my second year it was a 3-year assignment, right? So my second year was awesome. I mean, it was a great year. Nothing changed but my attitude. And the next thing you know, this boss who hasn't changed, he's still the same old guy. He's still doing the same old things. But I learned to love him. I did. I learned to anticipate him. I learned to anticipate how he thought. This guy was one of the smartest guys I've ever worked for. He was brilliant. He was one of the most brilliant people that I've ever worked for. And so I started to just pay attention to him. I decided I'm not going to dislike this guy. I'm going to love this guy. I'm going to listen to this guy. I'm going to pay attention to how he operates, how he thinks, and be like him, not in a negative way, because there was a lot of negative things, but the brilliance of the man was still there. So I said, you know what, I'm gonna anticipate, I'm gonna listen, I'm going to be the best, most positive person that I can be for this guy. And man, it opened up a whole new world for me. The next thing you know, I've been there 1 year, and then miserable year, second year, awesome year. And all of a sudden I'm enjoying Hawaii, right? I'm finally, after I wasted a whole year of not enjoying it. So I decide that, this third year is just going to be great, right? Well, he comes to me at the end of my second year, and he says, Todd, he goes, I need you to go talk to the boss. Well, who's the boss? The boss is his boss, who's a 2-star general. He said, the boss wants you to come be his executive officer, his aide, his right-hand man. And then I looked at him and I said, sir, I didn't apply for that job, because it's a job you had to apply for. It was a major step up for a major in the Air Force. And I said, sir, I did not apply for that job, nor do I want the job. And because it was brutal. It was a brutal job. It was, you were in at 6 a.m. You usually weren't home until 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and you were on call every weekend. It was a 7-day-a-week job, and huge responsibilities. And I just didn't know that's what the Lord wanted me to do, right? And how much time would it take away from my family? How much time would it take away from church? And I just didn't know those things. So I said, okay. He said, the boss wants you to come talk to him. So I did. I owed him that out of respect. And I went up there and I talked to the 2-star general, and he said, Todd, I want you to come be my executive officer. And I looked at him and said, sir, I appreciate that. I said, I didn't apply for the job. He said, I know that. He said, I've had 10 applicants for this job. He said, and all of them are probably more qualified than you are. He said, but I want you to have the job. I believe you're the best guy for the job, even though they may be better qualified for the job. He said, I believe you're the best guy for the job. And I learned right there's a difference between being qualified for a job, but being the best guy for the job. And what he meant by that is you fit this. Yeah, the other people on paper, they're qualified. But in terms of energy and demeanor and how you carry yourself, you're the guy. And I said, okay. I said, well, do you mind if I go home and I talk to my wife about this and we pray about this? I said, because this is a big decision. We were kind of hit with this. This is not something that we anticipated, talked about, because I had applied for it. And he said, oh, no. He said, take the weekend. That was a Friday. He said, take the weekend, but I need to know Monday. He said, I need to know Monday what you're going to do. So I did. And I went home, talked to my wife. We went camping that weekend, took the kids camping. They were younger. And so we took the kids camping and we talked about it. And my wife, Cecilia, said, I think it's a great opportunity. She goes, we'll make it. It's a year commitment. She goes, we'll make it. We'll make it through the year. The kids were probably 9, 7, and 3, I think. They were little. And so we did. We took the job. And it ended up, remember I said the first year was a terrible year. The second year was an awesome year. And I didn't think it could get any better. Well, that third year was absolutely incredible. It was the most incredible year I have ever had in my Air Force career. Even, I look back on it, because I had more years ahead of me still. But that was the best year. That was the absolute best year of my Air Force career, working in that office, working huge issues, political issues, national security issues. Unbelievable, engaging world leaders. My family got to meet the president of the United States. My son got to go down and shake his hand, and my daughter did too. And my wife got to meet the president of the United States, and it was just neat. It was a great year. It was awesome. But I started out with so much doubt and inadequacy and discouragement. And it was an attitude change for me. Your doubt is an attitude change. Your doubt comes from a lack of faith. I had a lack of, I didn't trust God through what he was trying to show me in my life. I didn't trust God for what he was doing in my life. I didn't trust God in that situation where he put me working in a very difficult part of the world at that time, in an area where I didn't understand, working for a boss who was almost impossible to work for. And then all the chaos of 9/11 and everything and the pressure that was going on. And I look back now and God had to teach me to trust him. He had to teach me. He had to show, Todd, you need to trust me. I'm allowing you to go through this stuff. It doesn't catch God off guard. He knows. He knew what was happening. He knew before I got to Hawaii what it was going to be like. When we got there a month before 9/11 thinking, man, this is going to be 3 years of vacation. No, it was 3 years of hard work, extremely hard work. And at the end of that third year, it was, when I got done with my 3 years there, it felt like I had 10 years worth of growth. That's what God did. It was just, God squeezed 10 years of growth into 3 years for me. And boy, I would have been in the pressure cooker for those 3 years. And I can't describe to you when I left there how I felt. It was the best. I felt so full. I felt so invigorated. I felt so, I had grown up. I grew up. It took that to grow me up in my Air Force career and in who I am as a person. It took that. It took that for me to grow up so when you have doubt, when you have all this self-doubt and inadequacy, that's natural. It's going to come, but understand you got to recognize it and say, you know what? I got to trust God. I've got to trust the Lord. I've got to have the best attitude I can have and know that God's doing the very best for me. And that whatever situation I'm in, that God is going to see me through it. He's going to give me the wisdom. I had to ask for wisdom so much because I didn't know. I just said, God, I need you to show me. And I'll never forget that one day the boss, the 2-star, came to me and he said, we need a plan for this big operation to support continued combat operations. And I was the lead of putting that plan together. And he said, and then Todd, I need you to come brief it to me so I can brief it to his boss, the 4-star general. And I'll never forget. I said, okay. I went and I put that plan together. It took me a couple of days. It took a lot of it took more than a couple of days. It took a lot of coordination. it was, it was a lot of moving parts, and I brought the plan forward, and it's all on PowerPoint and everything. And we got in a room full of big wigs, and we briefed that to the 2-star, so he could then turn around and brief it to the 4-star. And we got done. He looked at me and he goes, "Todd, I'm not briefing this to the 4-star. You are." And I was like, "Oh boy, whoo!" And I'll never forget that. And I walked away from that so invigorated again, so scared half to death, not knowing if this was going to be well received, not knowing if I was going to get yelled at, not knowing if I was going to get laughed out of the room, not knowing it. I didn't know what would happen. I really, really did not know what would happen. But I went in there knowing, Lord, I need you to give me wisdom. When I was putting that thing together, Lord, I need wisdom. I don't know what I'm doing. And that's scary. I don't know what I'm doing here. And he put people in my path, and he brought people beside me, and we put that thing together, and it hummed. I mean, it just hummed. It worked. Anyway. So I said, you know what? I had to move from focusing on myself to focus on serving others. I just focused on serving my boss and not complaining about my boss. That's what I did. I focused on serving him and not complaining about him, not finding fault in him. It's easy. It was so easy for me to find fault in him. That was so easy to do. No, I had to focus on serving him. That was number one. I had to focus on serving him. Number two, I had to stop comparing myself to others, because there were so many other people there who were better than me, smarter than me. And instead of comparing myself to those people, I had to tap into who they were and ask for their advice and use them. And that made me so much more valuable, because now I was tapping into their expertise in a part of the world I didn't understand, and weapon systems and airplanes I wasn't familiar with. So number one, I had to focus on serving. Number two, I had to stop comparing myself to others and just be who I was and get better and learn from them. And number three, I had to change my perspective on negative criticism, because I got a lot of negative criticism from my boss. It was a lot of the criticism was not given to us or any of us in a very positive way. It was always beat you up and hang you out to dry type of criticism. And I had to learn to take that. I had to learn to take it, not get mad about it, and learn from it. I had to learn to do that. And it was difficult. But when I learned to do that, things changed, because he didn't change. The circumstances didn't change. Todd changed, because the only one I can control is me. The only one you can control is you. You can't control how other people respond. You can't control how other people are. You can't control you can only control you. So if you're waiting for everybody else to change before you change, you're going to be waiting your whole life. You've got to just decide, I'm not doing this anymore. And so I had to just decide that I could take that negative criticism and apply it to my life and learn from it and be a better person for it. Pretty simple. You just got to do it, right? Number four, I had to learn to celebrate victories even when nobody else noticed. Even when nobody else noticed, man, I just learned something new. Man, I just figured this out. Man, I didn't understand this. For the last year, I didn't understand this, right? And I figured it. And then just celebrate, man. Give yourself a reward. Go buy yourself a Snickers bar or something, right? You and the Lord just celebrate that. That's that. And I had to learn to do that. And it was kind of silly, but I had to learn to just celebrate those things, right? And then I had to recognize unrealistic expectations. That sometimes the expectations are so high, and that when we fail at those, we feel inadequate, and you're going to fail at them. But when you fail, you've learned something. And so I had to take all my failures and see them as learning, right? Just say, okay, yeah, you know what? I'm not that smart. I'm not, but I'm learning. And boy, did I do a lot of learning, lots and lots and lots of learning in that. So this was my experience in a time when I felt really inadequate, a lot of self-doubt, a lot of struggles, miserable for that first year, and then left there. I was literally on cloud nine. I mean, it was just an incredible journey when I look back on that. And that last year was absolutely, now I can look back now and say all 3 years were the best, because that's in hindsight. But I was in the middle of that first year. I really thought, I was like, there ain't no way I'm gonna make it. I am not going to make it here. It's just not going to work. And I was trying everything I could do to maybe get transferred, to go work for somebody else. God shut it all down. Every time I tried to do something to get out of my circumstances, God had a way of showing up and shutting it down. And I would get so mad. I would get so mad. And but what a lesson. So what's your story? What are you doubting? What do you feel inadequate about? What are you struggling with? What are you carrying a bad attitude about that that you need to change it? You're not your circumstances aren't going to change. The people around you aren't going to change. It's you. You're the problem. You're the problem, right? It's not your boss, even though I thought it was. It's not the area of the world you're working in, even though I thought it was. It's not the late hours, even though I thought it was. It's not the fact that maybe your coworkers criticize you. It's not the fact of, I'm this or I'm that, or no, those aren't the issues. No, they might be, they might have some influence on the outside, right? But that's okay. That it's this. You're the only one who determines where you're going to go. You're the only one who determines your attitude. You're the only one who determines your focus. You're the only one who determines what you're going to do, how you're going to react, how you're going to learn, how you're going to grow. You're the only one who determines how you're going to get victory in these situations, and with self-doubt and inadequacy. You're the only one. Remember, all feelings and emotions are ultimately for our benefit. Even that self-doubt and that inadequacy, God's trying to show you something. He's trying to say, you can trust me. You might feel like you can't do this, and you can't, but I can. I can. So God's trying to show you something through those feelings, those emotions of self-doubt and inadequacy. How are you going to respond to them? That's the question. How are you going to change your attitude? Success is on you. It's not on anybody else. It's all on you. Man, long story. I know. I've told it so many times, and I'm going to tell you again. It's in here. It's in my book, along with many other stories of victory and change through pain. Get the book, www.toddrobinson.online. You can order the book through my website, www.toddrobinson.online. It's on Amazon. You can get it on Amazon. Forged, how pain brings great gain, and you can get it there as well. And just search for that under my name, Todd Robinson, and believe me, you want to get it. Took me 2 years to write that book. It's not very long, but I think it'll be a blessing to you. Have a great one.